The campfire crackled, spitting embers into the vast, inky blackness that stretched to the distant mountains. Elias felt it, a prickle on the back of his neck that wasn't the chill of the desert night. He'd seen plenty of things in his life out here, under these wide-open skies. Coyotes slinking through the brush, the flicker of distant lightning, the silent grandeur of a shooting star. But the whisper of a young girl, no older than his little sister would have been, huddled beneath a juniper, that was new. Fear, raw and untamed, radiated from her like heat from a branding iron on a summer day. He knew, with a gut certainty that rarely failed him, this wasn't just some lost kid. This was trouble, wearing the ragged cloak of desperation, and it was looking right at him. The aroma of brewing coffee mingled with the crisp, clean scent of pine, a perfect start to any day for Elias. His horse, Old Blue, a sturdy roan with a patient demeanor, munched contentedly on sparse desert grass nearby, the rhythmic tearing sound a familiar comfort. And rocky outcrops with the practiced eye of a man who lived by his wits in the wild. His hand instinctively went to the worn leather grip of the Schofield on his hip. He didn't pull it, not yet, but the familiar weight of the cold steel was a silent reassurance, a promise of swift action if needed. His eyes, honed by years of scanning horizons for movement, for danger, caught a flicker of something near a cluster of ancient junipers. A small figure, barely visible against the deep shadows cast by the rising sun, huddled low, trying to melt into the landscape. A girl. Young, maybe 15, judging by the slight frame and the way she held herself. Her clothes were torn, her hair a tangled mess, and her face, even from this distance, was etched with a terror so profound it made his own stomach clench. They were deep in the Oakhaven wilderness, a place Elias knew like the back of his weathered hand. Every arroyo, every hidden spring. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of cornered animals, in the faces of men who'd seen too much of the dark side of life. It was the look of someone hunted, someone with no place left to run. He didn't say a word, just watched, his mind racing. Who was she? What was she doing out here, alone and terrified, miles from anywhere? And more importantly, who was she hiding from? His peaceful morning had shattered, replaced by a tense silence punctuated only by the distant caw of a crow and the soft whicker of Blue. He could leave. Ride off, pretend he hadn't seen her, let whatever was coming pass him by. It was the sensible thing to do, the self-preserving thing. But the image of her face, haunted and vulnerable, stuck in his craw like a burr under a saddle. He couldn't just turn his back. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his quiet routine was over. The girl was here, and so was whatever trouble she brought with her. His peace was broken, and a new, unforeseen path lay before him. It was a place where the nearest town, Harmony, was a good 2 days' ride. A place where he came to lose himself and find a bit of peace from the world's clamor. He was just about to take that first glorious sip, the steaming mug warm in his calloused hand, when he heard it, a rustle in the undergrowth that wasn't a rabbit, not a snake, and certainly not a deer. It was too hesitant, too human. He froze, mug halfway to his lips, his gaze sweeping the sparse juniper trees. He lowered his mug slowly, his movements deliberate, careful not to spook her. He approached slowly, deliberately, his hands open and empty, making sure every step was visible and unthreatening. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, his voice low and calm like a gentle breeze through the pines. "And some jerky. You look like you could use it." Her eyes flickered to the steaming mug, then back to him, still wary, still searching his face for any hint of deceit. "Are you alone?" She finally rasped, her voice a reedy whisper, barely audible above the whisper of the wind. He didn't wait for her reply, just scooped up his rifle and his bedroll, his movements swift and efficient. He whistled for Blue, who trotted over, sensing the urgency in Elias's tone and posture. The girl, surprisingly, uncurled herself and followed, her movements still hesitant, but her eyes fixed on him like he was the last sliver of hope in a darkening world. As they moved deeper into the thicket, scrambling over rocks and through dense brush, the sounds of the chase grew louder, more menacing. Elias felt a surge of frustration, a bitter taste in his mouth. He'd lost his peace, his quiet morning, and now, with the baying of the hounds growing closer and the shouts becoming clearer, he realized he'd lost more than that. He'd lost his anonymity, and with it, his freedom from the very kind of trouble he'd spent his life avoiding. He nodded. "Just me and my horse, Blue. Been out here a few days, just minding my own business." She seemed to consider this, her gaze lingering on his face, trying to discern his intentions. He waited, patient as a mountain, knowing that some wounds needed time to open, some fears needed space to recede, before trust could even begin to bloom. "I ain't gonna hurt you. I promise." The girl flinched, pulling herself tighter into the meager shelter of the juniper, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird. Her breathing was ragged, shallow gasps that tore at the quiet morning. He could see now the dark smudges of dirt and dried blood on her face, the tear in her dress revealing a bruised knee. It wasn't just fear. It was exhaustion, too, and maybe hunger that had driven her to this desolate spot. "I got coffee," he offered, gesturing with his chin to the campfire. Suddenly, a distant shout echoed through the trees, a human cry that carried a chilling edge. It was followed almost immediately by the unmistakable, chilling baying of hounds. The girl gasped, pressing herself deeper into the thorny branches, a small, desperate whimper escaping her lips. Her eyes, wide with renewed terror, locked onto his, pleading. "They're here," she breathed, the words barely audible, laced with a despair that cut deep. "They found me." Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. Badges, he remembered from the camp description. Dark intentions. This wasn't some simple misunderstanding, some petty theft. This was something darker, more dangerous. He glanced quickly in the direction of the sound. It was still far, but closing, steadily, relentlessly. He knew those sounds, the coordinated pursuit, the hungry barks. Lawmen, maybe, or bounty hunters, or something far worse that hunted in packs. He had to make a choice, and fast. He could still ride out, leave her to face whatever was coming alone. It was the smart thing to do, the logical thing, the way to stay out of trouble. But the raw terror in her eyes, that fragile hope she'd placed in him, held him captive. He just couldn't turn his back on her, not with those sounds drawing closer. "All right," he said, his voice firm, decisive, cutting through the rising tension. "We move, now." The forest grew denser, the air cooler and heavy with the scent of damp earth as they climbed higher into the foothills. Every snapping twig beneath their boots, every rustle of leaves in the canopy above, made Elias tense, his hand never far from his holstered gun. He'd been just a boy, too young to fight, old enough to remember the cold glint of the badge on the man who led the raid. The same kind of badge Alara was so terrified of now. Her fear was palpable, a mirror of his own childhood terror, a raw emotion he recognized all too well. Not till we're clear of him, for good. Alara just nodded, her eyes wide, sensing the profound shift in him, the steel that had entered his quiet resolve. The choice was clear now, even if it meant risking everything he had carefully built, his freedom, his life. He wouldn't let another innocent be crushed by the same forces that had broken his family. He wouldn't follow reason. He'd follow his gut, his heart, and the echoes of a painful past that now demanded justice. They started their descent, leaving the open plains behind for the rocky, treacherous terrain of the canyons below, a new battleground for a fight that had just become deeply personal. His throat tightened. He had wanted to forget that past, bury it beneath years of solitary wandering, a life lived on his own terms, beholden to no one. But here it was, rising like a specter, forcing his hand, demanding his attention. He could still turn Alara over, wash his hands of the whole affair, and disappear back into the wilderness, erasing his tracks, returning to his chosen solitude. It was the safer path, the logical one, the one that would ensure his own freedom. But the thought left a bitter taste in his mouth, a metallic tang of betrayal. He thought of his pa, of the fight he'd put up against overwhelming odds, of his ma's silent, unyielding strength in the face of despair. They'd claimed his pa was an outlaw, a cattle rustler, a common enough accusation used to seize land. Elias knew better. He'd seen the greed in their eyes, the way they'd eyed his family's prosperous fields and well-kept herd. He'd seen his ma's tears, heard his pa's defiant last words echoing across the ravaged land. The memory, usually buried deep beneath years of solitary wandering and careful avoidance of civilization, now simmered a quiet rage beneath his calm exterior. It fueled his determination to protect Alara, not just from the men chasing her, but from the systemic injustice that had shadowed his own life. The girl, who'd finally introduced herself as Alara, was surprisingly resilient. Despite her obvious exhaustion and the fear that still clung to her like a shroud, she kept pace, her small frame moving with a desperate determination. They hadn't spoken much since that first exchange by the campfire, the silence a heavy companion as they navigated the treacherous terrain. But as they crested a ridge, revealing a vast, sprawling valley below bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun, a memory, sharp and unbidden, pierced Elias's calm demeanor. He remembered a similar ridge, a similar vastness, but under a sky stained with the acrid smoke of a burning farm. His family's farm. He looked at Alara now, her small frame silhouetted against the setting sun, vulnerable and desperate. "We ain't stopping," he said, his voice rougher than he intended, the words carrying the weight of his rediscovered conviction. The canyons were a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, each twist and turn a potential ambush. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the impending night. The hounds were closer now, their barks echoing off the rock walls, a chilling symphony of pursuit that seemed to reverberate in Elias's very bones. He remembered the lies, the injustice that had torn his family apart, the arrogant condescension of men like these. Each word exchanged was a volley, each silence a loaded pause, pregnant with unspoken threats. Elias's gaze flickered between the three men, assessing their positions, their weapons, calculating the angles, the distances. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered. Alara, hidden behind the boulder, let out a small, stifled whimper, and Elias's resolve hardened, turning to unyielding stone. He wouldn't let them take her, not after all this. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. He wouldn't let innocence be crushed under the heel of false authority again. "She ain't no fugitive," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, a rumble that seemed to vibrate off the canyon walls. The air crackled with unspoken threats. Scarface's hand twitched towards his gun, his sneer deepening into a snarl. This was it. The moment everything came to a head. Elias knew with a chilling certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he was about to face the deepest fear he'd carried since he was a boy, the fear of being helpless against the law as twisted justice. Just as Scarface began to draw, a sharp, deafening crack echoed through the canyon, not from Elias's gun, but from high above. A massive rock, dislodged by the vibrations, or perhaps a careless footstep, tumbled down with horrifying speed, striking one of the men squarely on the head. He crumpled without a sound, a lifeless heap. The other two, stunned, turned their attention to the falling debris, their momentary surprise a fatal error. The confrontation had taken a sudden, unexpected turn. "She's just a scared kid, running from bullies with badges." Scarface laughed, a harsh, grating sound that grated on Elias's nerves like sand on glass. "Scared or not, she's coming with us, or you can join her in a shallow grave. Your choice, cowboy." He moved with a quiet urgency, his rifle held ready. Elara a silent shadow behind him, her small hand clutching the back of his worn duster. His mind was a flurry of calculations, assessing every rock, every crevice, every potential escape route, every defensive position. He knew this terrain intimately, but he also knew that those who hunted them were likely just as familiar with its cruelties. Suddenly, a voice, harsh and commanding, boomed from above, magnified by the canyon's natural acoustics. "Hold it right there, cowboy. You got nowhere to run." Elias, with a practiced motion, pushed Elara behind a large, jagged boulder, drawing his Schofield in one fluid motion, the metal cool against his palm. 3 figures emerged from the deepening twilight, silhouetted against the last vestiges of daylight clinging to the rim of the canyon. Badges glinted on their chests, catching the faint light, but their eyes, even from a distance, held a predatory glint that spoke of more than just upholding the law. One of them, a man with a scarred face, a cruel sneer twisting his lips, stepped forward, his hand hovering over his own holstered gun. "That girl's a wanted fugitive, boy. Aiding and abetting is a federal offense. Hand her over, and maybe we can forget you ever saw her." Elias felt the cold fury rise within him, a familiar heat that started in his gut and spread through his veins. The standoff was absolute, the tension so thick Elias could almost taste it, like dust and gunpowder. "You're not taking her," Elias stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of a lifetime of suppressed anger and a renewed sense of purpose. The unexpected turn had bought them precious seconds, but Elias knew it wouldn't last. The 2 remaining men, recovering from their shock, were now doubly enraged, their shouts filled with a new, vengeful fury. It wasn't a choice. It was a burden, a heavy mantle he now wore. That freedom, once a profound comfort, now felt like a hollow echo, a shallow existence. His horse was still there, waiting for him, a testament to unwavering loyalty. A flicker of hope, small but persistent, ignited within him, a tiny ember in the encroaching darkness. He still had a chance to set things right, not just for Elara, but for himself, for the boy who'd watched his world burn. But this chance came with a monumental cost. He would have to face them head on, no more running, no more hiding in the shadows. He would have to become the fugitive he'd sworn he never would be, a man outside the law for the sake of justice. He pushed himself up, his shoulders screaming in protest, a sharp, fiery pain that quickly subsided into a dull throb. The air was cold, the moon a sliver above the canyon rim, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and shifted with the wind. He hesitated, a moment of profound doubt, then stepped out of the alcove, towards the lingering echoes of the chase, towards a final confrontation, his heart a mixture of grim courage and profound uncertainty. He was good at being alone, at living on the fringes, an independent spirit, untethered by obligation. But what good was that now, when someone needed him, truly needed him, and he might have failed them? He pulled out a small, tarnished locket from under his shirt, a chain that usually lay hidden against his skin. His mother's. He rarely looked at it, rarely let himself dwell on the past it represented. But tonight, he clutched it tight, the cold metal a physical anchor. It held a faded photograph of his family, a family he'd lost to the very law he was now fighting, the very injustice he sought to prevent. He was hurt, his shoulder throbbing with a dull, persistent ache, and the canyon walls seemed to close in, echoing his ragged breaths and the frantic beat of his heart. He found a small alcove, deep enough to offer momentary respite, a tiny pocket of safety in the vast, indifferent wilderness. Elara was gone, vanished into the night, hopefully to safety, into the unknown. But the thought that he might have sent her into more danger, alone, unprotected, gnawed at him, a relentless worm of doubt. He closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cool, unforgiving rock, trying to steady his breathing. The quiet was a stark contrast to the chaos of moments before. A brief, fragile peace before the storm inevitably broke again. He shoved Alara. "Run! Keep going! Don't look back!" Before diving for cover as bullets whizzed past him, kicking up dust and showering him with rock fragments. He returned fire, aiming not to kill, but to disarm, to slow them down, to buy more time for Alara to escape. He took a hit, a searing pain in his left shoulder, a bullet grazing him, but it was just a graze, a fiery reminder of the stakes. He tasted blood in his mouth, but it wasn't his. It was the metallic tang of adrenaline, the raw taste of survival. He found himself alone again, just as he preferred it, but this time, the solitude felt different. He thought of all the nights he'd spent under the open sky. Just him and Blue, with no one to answer to, no one to protect. A distant whinny broke the silence, a familiar sound that cut through the darkness like a beacon. Blue, his loyal companion. He hadn't run. The final confrontation was a blur of dust, gunsmoke, and the primal urge to survive. Elias, fueled by a simmering rage and the desperate need to protect, fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. He moved like a shadow, using every rock, every crevice, every trick learned from a lifetime in the wilderness. He disarmed one man with a swift, brutal kick, sent another sprawling with a well-placed shot that tore through his hat, not his skull. They wouldn't go back to the world they'd known. That world no longer existed for them. They would carve a new path, together for now, under the watchful gaze of the juniper moon. The journey was far from over, the dangers ahead uncertain and plentiful, but the most difficult part, the decision to fight, had been made. As they rode away, leaving the canyon behind, leaving behind the echoes of violence and fear, Elias looked up at the vast expanse of stars, a silent promise hanging in the air. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, filled with questions, but he carried with him the echo of his past, the weight of his choices, and the quiet understanding that some battles, once joined, never truly end. The path stretched before them into the unknown. Some trails, once taken, never truly lead you back to where you began. Then outmaneuvered the last, using the canyon's treacherous terrain to his advantage. Scarface, the last one standing, met his gaze, the arrogance finally replaced by raw, unadulterated fear. Elias didn't kill him. He just disarmed him, smashing his rifle against a rock, leaving him bound and bewildered. A clear message left in the dust. Not revenge, but justice. When the last echo of the struggle faded, silence descended again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. The quiet after a storm. Heavy with the weight of what had passed, yet also hinting at a new beginning. A world reshaped. Elias found Alara huddled near Blue, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, her small body trembling. She was safe. That was all that mattered. The only thing that truly cut through the exhaustion and the lingering pain. He patched up his shoulder as best he could, tearing strips from his shirt, the dull throb a constant reminder of the fight. But it was a minor ache compared to the deeper, more profound shifts within his own soul. The quiet life he once cherished, the solitary existence lived on his own terms, was gone. He was no longer just Elias, the cowboy who drifted with the wind, beholden to no one. He was Elias, the protector, the one who had chosen to stand against injustice, even if it meant becoming a target himself, living outside the law he once avoided. He had lost his anonymity, his untroubled peace, the freedom of a life unburdened by others' troubles. But he had gained something far more profound, a purpose, a connection to a fight that was bigger than just him, a quiet sense of rightness he hadn't known since he was a boy. He helped Alara onto Blue, his loyal companion, whose soft nuzzle against his hand was a comfort in the stillness.